Have you ever met someone who moves through life like they already know the ending of the story? Calm, quiet, and powerful? It's not magic, darling. It's mastery. And today I will tell you what they will never tell you. There is a quiet strength in the ones who do not rush to fill the room with sound. They do not need to announce their presence with thunder or wrap themselves in loudness to feel significant. They carry themselves like the wind, invisible, undeniable. These people, the smart ones, the ones whose minds move like rivers beneath a still surface, have learned something most folks never understand, that power, real power, does not need to be declared. It does not call for applause. It does not chase attention. Power protects itself not with muscle, not with noise, but with silence, deep, deliberate, and impenetrable. In silence, power builds its walls not from brick, but from boundaries no one sees until they try to cross them. To speak too often is to spend energy on what does not nourish the soul. The sharpest minds recognize that some truths, once spoken, become diluted, tangled in interpretation, and tossed into the wind like feathers that never find their way back. So they hold their truths close, not out of fear, not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for what has not yet ripened. Like a farmer guarding the first sprout of spring, they do not shout to the village that something is growing. They tend to it in the quiet, knowing the earth works best without constant digging. They understand that if you open the soil too early, you kill what you were meant to nurture. Power is no different. It needs stillness to settle. It needs silence to become whole. Many people mistake volume for wisdom. They believe the loudest in the room is the leader, that speaking first is a sign of intelligence. But those who've tasted power know better. They watch while others talk. They listen, not just to the words, but to the tremble underneath them. They listen to the tone behind the praise, the silence between the sentences. They do not just hear, they study. And in that study, they gather more than most could ever imagine. It is in the spaces that most overlook, the pause, the glance, the breath before the answer, where they harvest understanding. Their silence is not absence, it is depth. Their stillness is not weakness, it is calculation, compassion, and control braided into one. Silence also serves as armor. The less you reveal, the less they can twist. Smart people know that when you say too much, you hand people the tools to misunderstand you, to mold your truth into their fiction. But when you hold back, when you speak only when the time is precise and the moment demands it, every word becomes a stone that cannot be moved. This is why the wise are feared, not for what they say, but for how little they need to. Their restraint makes others wonder what they know, what they see, and what they're preparing for. It creates an aura that cannot be imitated because it is born of discipline, of learning when to hold the tongue so the soul can speak louder. There are also wounds that power must shield, scars earned in private that become the source of resilience. The wise do not parade their pain. They do not turn suffering into spectacle. They let silence be the salve that heals. And in that quiet healing, strength is born. Not the kind that flexes, but the kind that holds others when they cannot stand. Smart people understand that pain is power when processed, but only if kept safe from those who would turn it into weakness. So they protect it, not with denial, but with silence. They whisper to their own hearts, they weep in rooms with no audience, and they emerge not bitter, but wiser. They learn that silence is not the absence of expression, it is the birthplace of mastery. They retreat not to hide, but to sharpen. They disappear not to run, but to rise. There is a peculiar thing about vision. It arrives before it is welcome. It shows up like a whisper in a loud room, often dismissed, doubted, or misunderstood by those who cannot see beyond what is already standing in front of them. Vision is the sacred preview of a future not yet lived, And for those who carry it, it feels like a weight and a wonder all at once. But the wise, those with eyes that look past the horizon, know this: vision must be held in silence before it is spoken into sound. Not everything you see is meant to be shared at the moment it is seen, because vision, when spoken too soon, becomes prey to doubt, ridicule, or distraction. When you name your dream before it's rooted, you open the door to wind strong enough to snatch it from the soil. And there are too many voices in the world who speak not from belief, but from fear, from envy, from their own unresolved regret. Smart people protect their visions like precious heirlooms, not out of secrecy, but out of respect for what is still becoming. There is danger in telling too much too early. The heart that dreams is tender in the beginning. It beats with hope, but it is still unarmored. It is soft and unsure, still questioning itself in the quiet. And when you expose it too soon, when you explain your vision before it has shaped itself inside you, you allow others to plant their uncertainty in your soil. You'll find yourself adjusting your path not based on your own compass, but on their commentary. You'll shrink your dream to fit into their understanding, forgetting that they were never meant to carry what was placed inside you. Smart people understand that just because something is real within you doesn't mean it's ready for the world. They let their vision ferment, deepen, stretch inside their soul until it's too strong to be shaken, too rooted to be reasoned away. The wise don't need validation to believe in what they see. They don't go around collecting approval like coins in a jar. They know that vision is often a lonely gift. It comes without applause. It walks hand in hand with uncertainty. But those who have danced with destiny understand that the silence before the bloom is part of the design. Trees do not shout when they are growing. Flowers do not scream when they are unfolding. And yet their growth is no less powerful. In fact, it is more so because it is not for show. It is for strength. Smart people build in the dark. They plan in stillness. They nurture their dreams where noise cannot touch them, where eyes cannot judge them, where the only voice that matters is the one that echoes from within. And vision, unspoken, becomes sacred. It creates a fire that burns steady instead of fast. It allows space for trial, for error, for refinement, without the pressure of performance. When you keep your vision close, you are free to fail in private, to grow without critique, to course correct without humiliation. There is freedom in that kind of privacy. There is wisdom in knowing that some parts of your journey are not meant for display. The smart ones, the truly wise, they don't dim their light, but they learn to shade it until it's strong enough to shine on its own. They do not rush to be seen. They prepare to be undeniable. They know, too, that energy is currency and that every explanation costs something. The more you explain, the more you deplete what should have been used to build. So they speak less and move more. They do not broadcast their blueprint because they are too busy laying the bricks. While others post promises, they pour foundations. While others talk of towers, they are already climbing. There is a kind of pain that does not announce itself with screams or tears. It moves quieter than sorrow and sits heavier than rage. It creeps in through the moments no one sees, when the room is empty, when the mirror reflects back not just your face, but everything you've had to survive. It is not the kind of pain that demands sympathy or draws a crowd. It is the kind that digs its roots deep into the spirit and changes the shape of who you are. And yet, for those who learn to endure it without bitterness, without breaking, it becomes more than just suffering. It becomes transformation. Because pain, when it does not destroy you, refines you. It scrapes away the surface, strips the illusions, and forces you to meet yourself without all the masks. It is violent and sacred, brutal and holy. Smart people, those who walk with wisdom in their eyes, do not parade their pain, but they do not deny it either. They let it work on them in silence, turning the ache into awareness, the wound into wisdom, the scar into strength. The kind of pain that polishes the soul rarely happens in the spotlight. It does not care for audience or applause. It comes in private trials, in quiet betrayals, in long nights that stretch into darker mornings. It is the pain of becoming, of shedding layers that no longer serve you, of grieving versions of yourself you've outgrown, of learning the hard way that not everything that feels good is good for you. And in that process, something essential happens. The noise of the world begins to fade, the need for approval, the fear of being misunderstood, the hunger to be seen, it all begins to lose its grip. Because pain, when it has moved through you completely, teaches you what truly matters. It clears the room of distraction, it humbles the ego, it reminds you that life owes you nothing, but gives you everything if you're willing to let it shape you. Smart people do not share that journey while it's unfolding. They do not bleed in front of those who only came to watch. They understand that healing is not a performance, and growth is not always pretty. They choose to suffer in silence not because they are weak, but because they are wise enough to protect the sacred space where transformation begins. And yet pain never leaves you the same. It burns away what was built on illusion. It forces you to reconstruct your identity with materials more honest, more durable. You begin to carry yourself differently, and not with arrogance, but with a kind of grounded knowing. You learn not to chase people who cannot see you. You stop trying to explain your worth to those who never learned how to listen. You begin to walk with a softness that isn't weakness, but restraint, a tenderness that was hard-earned. Pain teaches patience, not the passive kind, but the kind that waits with purpose, the kind that knows rushing healing only deepens the wound. Smart people give themselves the time to feel, to grieve, to rage if they must, but they do it behind closed doors, away from the noise, far from the careless opinions of those who've never carried anything heavier than comfort. Pain that polishes does not always look poetic. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like a person who suddenly moves differently, speaks less, smiles with a kind of sorrow behind the eyes. But within them, the fire has not gone out. It has simply gone inward. They are not lost. They are refining. The soul, like a diamond, does not gleam until it has been cut, until it has been pressured, until it has been shattered just enough to reveal its brilliance beneath the rough. There are battles that are loud, battles that draw attention, fists raised, voices high, wounds displayed like trophies. And then there are other battles, the kind you fight without a sound. No trumpet announces them. No one stands by to witness your struggle. These are the private wars, the hidden conflicts that unfold behind calm eyes and polite smiles. The world sees composure, but they do not see the cost of maintaining it. They see grace, but not the grit beneath it. Smart people, the ones who have walked through storms without leaving footprints, understand that strength is not proven in how many people watch you fight. It is proven in how well you endure when no one knows what you're enduring. There are fires you walk through that no one will ever feel the heat of. And that's by design, not by denial, not by shame, but by choice. Because some things lose their sacredness when made too visible. Not all pain needs an audience. Not every wound should be shown to the world. There is a kind of dignity in the unseen struggle. The wise don't broadcast every trial they face, not because they are hiding, but because they have learned to hold their suffering like a sacred stone, heavy, yes, but meaningful. They know that some moments are too intimate, too raw, too forming to be shared. Because when you are in the midst of becoming, you cannot always explain the process. You don't have the language for it yet. You are still bleeding truth, still shaping understanding. To speak too soon is to risk distorting the lesson. And smart people would rather carry the weight alone than hand it to someone who will only add to it with careless words and shallow advice. The greatest growth often happens in silence, and the deepest strength is forged when no one is watching. There is a certain kind of stillness in those who have fought internal wars. It lives in the way they pause before speaking, in how they listen with their whole body, in how they move with a gentleness that hints at battles long endured. These are the people who have faced demons in the dark, not the kind that scream, but the kind that whisper doubt into the crevices of the mind. They have wrestled with self-worth, with loss, with the ache of invisibility. They have cried in the middle of ordinary moments, in grocery store aisles and traffic lights, places where no one noticed their world collapsing quietly, and yet they never let it show. They wiped their tears before anyone looked, fixed their face, adjusted their shoulders, and carried on. Not because they were trying to appear perfect, but because they had learned that survival isn't always something others can understand. Smart people pick their battles, and more importantly, they pick their battlegrounds. They know that some conflicts are best fought in silence, with no one to cheer or critique. Because when you fight publicly, you inherit the expectations and judgments of others. But when you fight privately, you fight on your own terms. There is clarity in that. There is control. The wise have nothing to prove. They are not performing resilience. They are practicing it. They are not chasing recognition. They are chasing peace. So they fight in the quiet. They heal in the background. They win in ways no one will ever know. And that victory, the kind that needs no validation, is the most powerful of all. Because not all armor is worn where it can be seen. Sometimes it lives in a steady gaze, in a voice that never shakes even when the heart is breaking. Sometimes it lives in the decision not to respond, not to react, not to expose what is sacred to the carelessness of public opinion. And those who walk this path of private perseverance carry a kind of strength the world will never fully understand. There is a quiet intelligence that lives in the art of observation. The sharpest minds are often the least hurried to speak, the slowest to interrupt, the most content to simply watch. In a world addicted to reaction, to volume, to speed, there is something almost radical about stillness, about letting the noise pass you by while your eyes gather what your tongue has no need to claim. Smart people, the ones who understand that knowledge is not always collected through speaking, but often through seeing, have mastered the sacred act of restraint. They sit in rooms full of chatter and do not feel the need to compete. They do not fill silences with nervous noise. They do not force themselves into conversations just to prove they belong. Instead, they observe faces, patterns, movements, tones. They watch the way people talk when they think no one is listening. They notice the glances exchanged, the stories told in the space between words, the energy that enters before a mouth ever opens. Because people always reveal themselves, not in what they say, but in what they show when they believe no one is paying attention. The wise do not rush to label, define, or advise. They take their time because they know that the truth has layers and the surface rarely tells the whole story. Watching is not about judgment. It is about understanding. It is about standing still long enough to see beyond the performance, to glimpse the person beneath the persona. Smart people know that you cannot hear what is really being said if you're always preparing your response. So they listen. With their ears, yes, but also with their eyes, their spirit, their intuition. They read the room before they enter it. They feel the shift in the atmosphere. They notice who gets smaller when someone else walks in, who interrupts too quickly, who stays too quiet when something cruel is said. These are the details that cannot be found in loud declarations or rehearsed speeches. These are the truths that reveal themselves only to those patient enough to watch. There is also power in withholding your reaction, In a world that teaches you to respond instantly, to post every thought, to defend every move, the wise practice the discipline of delay. They do not allow emotions to hijack their discernment. They observe before they decide. They gather facts before they engage. They know that the first truth is rarely the full truth, and that time has a way of showing you what you missed in the moment. So they do not jump to conclusions. They do not strike blindly. They wait, they watch, and in that watching, they often find answers that others miss entirely. There is a kind of mental freedom in not needing to be the loudest. It allows you to conserve energy, to think clearly, to remain untouched by the chaos of surface-level thinking. To watch without reacting is not passivity, it is precision. The smart ones know that control begins with awareness. You cannot influence what you do not understand. So they gather data. They map human nature. They learn how people move when they're confident and how they shrink when they're afraid. They notice which words light up a room and which ones dim the air. They see how fear wears a mask, how ego disguises itself as certainty, how kindness can be strategic and cruelty can be subtle. And they take all of it in, not to manipulate, but to move wisely, to speak only when the words serve a purpose, to act only when the action will land where it needs to. Because some things cannot be taught in books or told in stories. They must be witnessed. And it is in the act of watching, of really seeing, that the wise collect the truths that others talk too loudly to hear.